That bag of layer feed you picked up last week, whether it ran you $18 or $30, you left money on the table. Not because you bought the wrong thing, because dry grain passes through a laying hen at somewhere around 60 to 70% digestibility. That's the part that never makes it onto the label. You're paying for 100 pounds of nutrition, and your birds are getting maybe 65 pounds worth of value out of it. Ferment that same feed, same bag, nothing added but water and 3 days, and that number goes up. Your hens eat a little less. They lay a little better. The bag stretches further. Tonight, you can have your first batch going.
Now I know what you've seen, the fermented feed videos that promise one bag becomes two, that you'll never buy feed again, that the bill drops to nothing. I spent 32 years at the feed counter, the last several running the county mill, and I can tell you right now what that math is worth. It's not right. And I'm not here to sell you that version. The real version is smaller than the thumbnail, and it's still worth doing. That's the honest thing I can say now that I'm not standing behind a counter. Here's what this actually is. Lacto-fermentation, same biology as sourdough, same as yogurt and sauerkraut. The bacteria that do the work are already sitting right on the grain. You don't buy them, you don't add them, you just give them the right conditions. Your great-grandparents called it the soak bucket. Every farm had one in the corner of the barn. Nobody charged them for it, and that right there is exactly why you've never seen it on a store shelf. 3 steps. No special equipment, and by the end of this, I'll show you what my own feed log actually says, the real numbers, not the ones that make a good thumbnail. I'll also show you the one mistake that ruins most people's first batch. Simple to avoid once you know it. Let's start with what goes in the bucket. Whatever layer ration you're already running, crumble, pellet, whole grain, ferment that. Don't switch feeds, don't buy something special. The fermentation doesn't care what form the grain is in. Use what you've got. The container matters more than most people think. Food-safe plastic bucket or ceramic crock, lid included. 5-gallon is a good starting size. What you don't want is metal. Lacto-fermentation creates an acidic environment over time, and acid and metal don't belong together in something your birds are eating. The ratio is straightforward. Fill the bucket about 1/3 of the way with feed. Then add water until the grain is covered, plus a few inches on top of that. That grain is going to swell. Dry grain sitting right at the water line will push up through it as it absorbs. You need headspace. 1 part feed, 2 parts water by volume. Doesn't have to be exact. Err toward more water, not less. Raw apple cider vinegar, the cloudy kind, with the mother in it. Honest answer, it helps, but it isn't required. What it does is acidify the environment early, which gives the beneficial bacteria a head start. A couple tablespoons in a 5-gallon bucket when you're starting fresh is plenty. After the first week, the liquid already in the bucket does that job for you. Put the lid on. Set it somewhere warm. A kitchen corner, a utility room. Then leave it alone. My grandfather had a bucket just like this, sitting in the corner of his barn every single day of his life. He called it the soak. Didn't know the word lactobacillus. Didn't need to. He watched what it did to his flock, and he kept doing it. I spent 32 years ringing up the bag that replaced it. I'm not saying that to judge anybody. I sold it too, every day. But the soak bucket was working long before the feed truck ever showed up. Here's the one rule that isn't optional. That grain has to stay below the waterline. All of it, all the time. The first couple of days, check it once a day and stir it down. Dry grain floats before it absorbs. As it swells, it'll stay under on its own. But until it does, press it down. Grain sitting above the waterline is grain exposed to air. Grain exposed to air in a warm, wet environment will grow mold. That's not a fermentation problem. That's a grain wasn't submerged problem. Keep it under water and you're almost certainly fine. One rule, that's it. Now about that 24-hour window. 24 hours gets you soaked feed. That's not nothing. Soaked grain is more digestible than dry, but it is not fermented feed. 3 to 5 days is what you're after. That's when the lactobacillus have had enough time to produce lactic acid and break down the phytic acid sitting in the grain. Phytic acid is what blocks mineral absorption. It's the thing that means your hen isn't getting full value out of the ration even when she's eating enough. Break that down, and what's already in the feed becomes more available to her. 3 days minimum. 5 days gives you a strong ferment. You'll know it's working 2 ways. Slow bubbles rising through the liquid, that's CO2, the sign the bacteria are active, and a smell that's sour and tangy, like mild sourdough or the inside of a pickle jar. Not sharp, not bad, just sour. If it smells genuinely rotten, not sour, actually putrid, dump it and start over. Surface mold that's only on top and the rest smells right? Skim it. Press the grain back down. Keep going. Mold throughout? Start fresh. No harm, no cost. Temperature changes the timeline. A warm kitchen ferments in about 3 days. A cool shed in January takes 4 or 5. Both get you there. The grain is keeping time, not the calendar. Once you're a week in, here's how this actually runs. Each day you scoop out what the flock needs, then refill with fresh grain and water. The liquid already in the bucket, now acidic and full of active bacteria, inoculates the new grain in a fraction of the time. Inside a week, you've got a system that almost runs itself. The setup is easy. The ferment runs itself. Where most people lose the benefit is in the feeding out, and it's a simpler fix than you'd think. A mesh strainer or a slotted spoon, something that holds grain and lets the water fall through. Scoop the wet grain into rubber or plastic bowls, not metal, same reason as the bucket. What you want is moist grain, not soup. Pour it in without draining, and the hens drink the liquid and skip the grain. They eat less than they should, and you spend a week thinking the system doesn't work. Drain it. Takes 30 seconds. How much? Roughly 1/4 to 1/3 cup of wet fermented grain per bird per day is a solid working range. That grain is heavier than it was dry because it's holding the water it absorbed. You're still feeding the right amount of nutrition. The measure just looks different. First week, run the fermented feed alongside the dry ration. Don't pull the dry feed on day 1. Let the flock self-select. Most flocks are hitting the fermented bowl first within a few days. Some take a week. Either way, they'll make the switch on their own. Once they do, ease the dry ration back. One more thing about warm weather. Don't leave wet fermented grain sitting in a hot dish all day. Summer heat speeds spoilage. Put out what they'll clean up in an hour or 2. In winter, a full day's worth in the bowl is fine. In August, it isn't. Now here's what my feed log actually shows, not the version that makes a good thumbnail. Over sustained months of fermenting the main layer ration for 14 hens, dry feed consumption dropped roughly 20 to 25%, not 50. Not 1 bag becomes 2. 20 to 25, month after month, documented. On a standard 50-pound bag that runs anywhere from $18 to $30 depending on where you live and what you're buying, that's real money coming back every month. Modest, ongoing, real. Add it up over a year and it's worth doing. Here's where I need you to pay close attention, because this is where people hurt their birds without knowing it. Fermentation improves digestibility. It does not raise the protein content of your feed in any meaningful way. A laying hen needs roughly 16 to 18% protein in her overall diet. That number does not change because the grain spent 3 days in a bucket. The mistake I saw play out more than once. Somebody starts fermenting scratch grain because it's cheaper than layer feed. Scratch typically runs 9 or 10% protein, sometimes less. The hens love it. The feed bill drops. Then 6 or 8 weeks later, the eggs go soft. Combs fade out. Production falls. They blame the fermentation. The fermentation isn't the problem. The problem is the birds have been running on half the protein they need. Ferment your layer feed. If you ferment scratch too, treat it as you always have, a small supplement on the side, not a replacement for the main ration, and keep oyster shell out free choice no matter what's going into the bucket. The shell gland pulls calcium on its own schedule. A ferment bucket doesn't change that.
If you want all 7 ways I stack this together, fermenting, fodder, the kitchen scrap system, the feed plants, it's all written out in the playbook, along with a feed cost calculator where you put in 3 numbers and see what your flock is actually costing you every month. Links below. And if an old feed man finally giving you the straight version means something to you, subscribe. I put one of these out most days.
Two things slow a laying hen down when the cold sets in: shorter days and the energy she's burning just to stay warm. Fermentation doesn't fix the daylight problem. That's a different video. What it does is support the gut through the cold months. A bird with a strong gut absorbs more from every bite she takes. She holds her body condition better through a cold stretch. Over the winters I've tracked, my hens on fermented feed held condition noticeably better than the one winter I ran dry. The production numbers weren't dramatic. The condition was. A hen in good shape going into February has a fighting chance of laying in February. I'm not promising you January eggs. I'm telling you what 14 hens and a feed log show. Here's what to actually do this week. 1. Food safe bucket, layer ration 1/3 full, water up to about 2/3. Lid on, warm corner. That's tonight. 2. Leave it 3 days. Come back, check for bubbles and a sour smell. Both there? You've got fermented feed? Neither there yet? Give it another day. Temperature runs the clock, not you. 3. Drain into rubber or plastic bowls and set it out alongside the dry feed. Don't pull the dry ration yet. Give the flock a week to find it, and make the switch on their own. 4. The day you scoop out what they've eaten, add fresh grain and water back into the same bucket. Don't start from scratch. Let the system keep running. The liquid already sitting in there will have the new grain fermenting in half the time it took the first batch. That's the whole method. Don't worry about the ratio being perfect. A little more water than feed is always better than a little less. If the first batch doesn't smell right, dump it. It cost you nothing but a few days, and it almost never happens when the grain stays underwater. Start with 1 bucket. If the flock takes to it, add a second. Don't build this bigger than you feel comfortable managing on a Tuesday morning. Ferment as hard as you like. Run the system every day, and you should. But keep that layer feed at 16 to 18% protein, and keep the oyster shell out free choice. Those two things don't change because the grain spent 3 days in a bucket. A hen with a strong gut and not enough protein is still a hen that slows down and eventually stops laying. And if she stops laying, you haven't saved anything at all. You've just kept a yard bird at a discount. Cutting the bill is fair game. Cutting the nutrition isn't. The soak bucket didn't disappear from the American farm because the bag of feed was better. It disappeared because the bag was profitable. To the mill, to the distributor, to the store, to every set of hands it passed through before it reached your truck. I was one of those hands for 32 years, and I'm not pretending otherwise. The old method worked fine. It just didn't make anybody any money. And that means the tool that costs you nothing has been sitting right there the whole time, waiting. Same bag of feed you bought last week. Nothing added but water and 3 days. Your hens absorb more, eat a little less, and the bag stretches further. That's not a miracle, and it's not a trick. It's what grain does when it's handled right. You already have everything you need to start.
I'm Earl. I sold that bag for 32 years. Real glad to be on this side of the counter now. Go get your bucket going tonight. Next time, what I add to that same ferment bucket to push the protein up naturally for almost nothing, using something most of you have sitting around already. I'll see you then.